Like if I tell the right story in the right way, time is irrelevant.
And when I think back,
It's 1993. I'm 22.
You reflect upon your day. You ask yourself what is the most important moment of this day.
Today at Escape 9 to 5, I'm sitting down again with the one and only master storyteller, Matthew Dix. He's the 51-time winner of Moth, the best-selling author of the book Storyworthy.
Time is only relevant if you suck.
The brain behind the practice, homework for life.
Homework for life is the idea that every single day contains something that's worth holding on to.
And from turning a plain day in the life practice into a pitching idea.
That's an ABC story. You know, sometimes you could tell stories differently.
From translating boring biotech data into a day-to-day metaphor, Matthew shares how business owners and founders can pitch from their heart.
People invest in people more than companies and products.
Proving that the right story can bend time, win trust, and move mountains.
And I just feel like everything is fine and I'm part of the group. So that's a good feeling to come away thinking, oh, I belong there. And
storytelling isn't a soft skill, it's survival. Let's dive into this conversation. Hey, thank you so much for joining us. I'm very, very happy that my guest is Matthew Dix, who knows a lot of things about storytelling, and he has helped me a lot, including his students also have helped me a lot in my storytelling journey. I'm so happy to welcome him back again.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, you're my first repeat guest, so I have a special format for you.
Okay.
I usually opened my podcast with 2 truths and a lie, which you have done it last year, but I crafted this a new format for you as 2-minute life trailer. So imagine Netflix has dropped the trailer of your life since last year, our conversation. What are the moments that will be put in that 2 minutes? Can you share with us?
Wow. For the last year then?
Yes.
Okay. So in the last year, I love this. This is tricky, but excellent. So in the last year, I taught 25 children how to get ready for middle school and made the decision that I think next year will be my last year of teaching before I move on to some other things. I finished a book that's going to come out next year. And I sort of launched a career in delivering keynotes around the country, in addition to the consulting and the speaking that I've been doing, a more formal approach to public speaking in larger venues. My son became a cuber and a rail fanner and a catcher for his baseball team. And my daughter, she continued her journey in cinema, knowing everything you can possibly know about film, has managed to acquire a bunch of friends who I can't speak to because their gender and their social anxieties are all like not aligned in a way that make any sense to me, and I don't want to say the wrong thing. So I just feed them and smile at them. That's been the last year.
Oh, wow. That's like a whole packed year. A few things I want to tap into. One is, I know that you've been a teacher for 27 years or 28 years, whatever that is. What makes you want to finally decide that you're going to move on from teaching students in primary school to move on to the next thing? We can start from there.
Yeah, a couple of things. One is I've got 2 kids that are getting ready to go to college in a few years, so making more money would be useful. It's also, you know, I love teaching, and it's going to be really hard if I leave it. So I'm sort of like leaving a small chance that I may continue on. But every year in education, at least where I teach, they've taken away a bit of joy, not from me, but from the kids. They steal the fun things that kids get to do, and it sort of breaks my heart. And so every year when they steal something, they make it actually easier for me to leave because teaching just doesn't provide the joy that it once did. It still is a joyous career, and I love my students dearly, but it's not the same in terms of my ability to have freedom to do wonderful things with kids, and that makes me
one, happy for you to move on. The second is very sad to hear that nowadays they're taking joy away from the kids learning at school. Are you going to tell us what are you going to do for your next venture? Is it something relevant still to
I'll
the
just
kids?
do what I do now, really. Like I consult with companies now, and I coach leaders, and I travel and speak, and I just fit it into my teaching career, which is kind of crazy. And so my life will be less crazy. I won't have to sort of teach kids during the day and then come home and consult for 2 or 3 hours in the late afternoon and evenings. I won't have to fit my travel in. So my life will just become a little simpler. I'll have a little more time for my family. And, I won't be so sort of harried in the work that I'm doing. I'll be able to do some of the things that I love in a more casual and appropriate pace.
That's great, because since we last talked, actually, I've been listening to different kind of podcasts. Your name has been mentioned so many times.
Nice.
The most relevant one was I'm going to the Interesting People 3 in a month's time, and then I listen
You
to.
are. I'm going to be
Yeah, I
there.
am. Yeah.
Yeah.
Are you?
Yeah, I'm
Oh,
going to be
great.
there. I'll be teaching there. I'm teaching comedy this year.
Awesome. Yes, I was going to ask you because I was like, if we are going to be there, and we can do this in person, but it's good that we have this preview. So then you can share your experience with us when you went to Interesting People too.
Yes.
Like, was there a mic drop storytelling moment that you still think about? Like, just imagine that we're going to be in IP3 and then you share the moments from IP2.
Well, the thing I always think about is,
Yeah.
it's being run by Andrew Wilkinson and his team. And, Andrew is an author and literally a billionaire who has signed the Giving Pledge. So he's
Exactly.
kind of an extraordinary person in a whole bunch of ways. And the room is filled with sort of really extraordinary entrepreneurs and business people. And, when I go to a place like that, there's always a moment of hesitation that I'm going to be in a room full of people who are far more accomplished than I am and are doing bigger and more amazing things than I am. And yet every time I enter one of those rooms, I discover very quickly that, these are just people and they're all fine. And weirdly, I seem to be more confident than a bunch of them, which is really helpful as well. So, I think the mic drop moment for me is just the idea that I can sit with people and they can tell me about their $1 million companies and all the amazing things they're doing. And I just feel like everything is fine and I'm part of the group. So that's a good feeling to come away thinking, oh, I belong there. And there was a time in my life when I felt like I didn't belong anywhere, like my life was just a constant emergency. When you're homeless and you're in jail and you don't get to college till you're like 25 years old and you get kicked out of your house when you're a kid, you just don't feel like you have a place. And now I'm sort of discovering that I have a lot of places where I am perfectly fine. And basically I can go wherever I want now and feel comfortable where I am. So that was a good moment for me in IP2.
Yeah. I think these people, they're all extraordinary. I know Andrew because I read his book and I invited him to my podcast. So we're going to record one in-person one before the IP3. By reading his book and all of these other people who's going to be there, I know that as a matter of fact, I'm just very far away from what they have accomplished. However, I feel like the way that I learned from you also at the same time of fighting, jot down everything homework for life, and including last year I did my first storytelling in Singapore with your students.
Anna Ong.
Yes, and the storytelling. So I think that's actually more difficult than last week. I was speaking on a stage in one of the events hosted by Financial Times Live for my company.
Wow.
Because that one in Singapore is all, there's no script, no presentation, nothing is allowed. It's just 5 minutes. You need to be on stage with people who are like yourself and Anna On, who are super good at telling stories. I was like terrified, honestly. But after that time, I was like, yeah, it should be fine.
Yeah.
But it's all thanks to you and the students that you taught.
It's certainly also thanks to the hard work and the commitment that you make. Teachers can only offer so much. It is the student that either decides to take it and use it or to leave it behind and continue living the way they live. So credit to you for taking advantage of that. So great job.
Thank you. I also think it's because of the conversations that I have on this podcast, because I was a little bit scared of going to pitch the idea in the event. And then when I got the opportunity to speak, I have only like 10 days left. So I have to turn the climate finance story into a gripping narrative in just 10 days. But then I lean on to what Anna told me about 7-picture technique. I don't know what kind of technique you taught in your class.
Yeah. Something similar.
She's like, you shouldn't be more than 7 pictures. So you need to remember that. Also, a previous guest on this podcast, Derek Sivis, he said, whatever scares you, go do it. Sorry, I've been sharing a lot more about myself. I would love to hear what's your best coaching advice for those panic mode storytelling moments and for people who can overcome their fear of feeling like they don't belong.
Well, I like what Derek said because, I started doing stand-up because I recognized it was something I was afraid of. And so I had to do it to conquer that fear. The thing I typically tell people is, let's try to imagine what the world is like a week from now. So if you're getting ready to go on a stage and tell a story, for example, if it doesn't go well, let's say you tell a bad story, a week from now, what does the world look like for you, right? It's probably no different, right? There's nothing really
Yeah.
changed. You have a memory of a bad experience that you probably learned something significant from, but it doesn't really matter. And so I'm always thinking, well, a week from now, this doesn't matter to me, so I'm not going to let it matter to me now. That's not always true. If my son is hurt, he just got a concussion a couple weeks ago, and like I was keeping a real close eye on him because that can become something, that can be a real problem. So that matters a week from now. So I worry about that. But most things I don't. Next week I'm going to be in Miami speaking in front of somewhere between 8 and 15,000 people in a stadium. It'll be the largest audience I ever speak to. And people have asked me, aren't you frightened? And I say, no, I mean, because, I'm going to go up there and I'm going to speak for 25 minutes and, it'll be fine. And maybe it'll be great and that'll be wonderful. And if it's fine, that will be fine too. And 2 weeks from now, I'll be on to my next thing. So, I'm
Yeah.
going to be in the moment and do the best job I can, but not worry about it because in the end, it's going to be fine. Everything will be fine in the end. It's sort of like just take that forward perspective as much as you can and acknowledge that this thing that seems really hard right now will seem like nothing in the future. So just let it seem like nothing now. Allow it to be nothing now.
Yeah. Allow it to be nothing now. While I was on stage, I was also thinking I wanted to share an idea for people so then they can open their eyes to this new opportunity in the financing space. But speaking of pitching ideas, in the past year, I've been telling other people about my startup idea for hundreds of times. Most of the time, people cannot get it because it's like a kind of a niche idea. One of the podcast guests on this podcast is Julian Treasure, and he's like a communication expert. He told me that you need to tell who, what, why, how in 20 seconds. I was like, this is very impossible for me. So what would you say to someone because everyone who has a startup or they have a company, they have a very niche like expertise. So they always think maybe it's 100 steps compared to the normal average Joe out there. Like, what would you tell them? How can they tell their story the best way?
Well, I don't like the advice of the 20 seconds. I think 20 seconds is really good if you're a bad storyteller and you don't know how to hold people's attention.
Yeah.
And so I have experience in business that I'll write a keynote for an executive and the executive will say, well, this is 18 minutes. It's too long. And I'll tell them it's not too long. You're just terrible on stage. And so you're afraid to be up there for 18 minutes. So you want it to be 12 minutes so it hurts less. Why don't you just work with me and level up your skills so you can do 18 minutes? Because 18 minutes is not a long time for someone who's entertaining and engaging and compelling. And the executive just isn't, right? And so when someone tells me, well, you got to get it out in 20 seconds, I think, no, I'm so good. I can hold someone's attention for 5 minutes. Like if I tell the right story in the right way, time is irrelevant. It just doesn't matter at all. No one's watching The Matrix and thinking, this is too long. No one's ever thought that about The Matrix in their life because it's so good the whole time that time becomes irrelevant in that movie. Right? The same thing happens with a book that you never want to end. You're reading a book that you love. It's 300 pages long and you're like, oh no, I'm coming to the end. That's because it was so good, time became irrelevant. Time is only relevant if you suck. So just don't suck and then you can speak for a longer period of time. So I would tell you, just craft the compelling, engaging pitch that no one can stop listening to, and then you'll have 3 to 5 minutes to do all the talking you need to do.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. I feel like sometimes people say that it's more difficult to write a short story, but then what I'm hearing from you is it's also difficult to hold people's attention for a long time, so you have the time and space to expand the story. Telling a story is kind of different from a pitch or a corporate presentation. Would you say there's some kind of nuance?
Not too different.
Okay.
It's sort of you use the same strategy. You're just not telling a personal story. But ideally, if you're pitching your company or pitching your idea, you're infusing it with stakes, suspense, prize, humor, right? You know what the ending is. You know what the beginning is. You know how to get from A to B. Just go watch Steve Jobs' 2007 iPhone launch. I can take you through that and show you here's stakes, here's suspense, here's surprise, here's humor. And he does it again and again and again. Now, he's not telling a personal story. He's introducing a product to the world. but he's using all the storytelling strategies that I use when telling a personal story. He's just telling a story about a product, you know, and that product will eventually be revealed and he'll describe it to us. But he spends a solid 9 minutes before he even reveals the product using stakes, suspense, surprise, and humor to get us excited about what we're about to hear. And no one complains that it was too long. No one has ever
Yeah.
said that 2007 iPhone pitch was way too long. You know, it's always appropriate. So I think
Yeah.
I just think people who think things are too long, they're either too long because they're bad, right? Or they're perfect. They're the appropriate length. It's either they're long because they're bad or they're good and then their length is perfect.
Yeah, I think there's a right balance of how much you get to prepare. Steve Jobs, I read the book about, the product manager who's part of the team of iPhone, and he wrote about like how much time Steve Jobs actually prepared for those presentations, because it's like a huge stage. And for people who are just starting out, what kind of advice or tips you can give it to them by telling? I feel like sometimes I am stacking the stories. When I was at Barcelona last week, I used part of the story I told on stage in Singapore from Anna
Yeah.
Ong's event.
Yeah.
Because that's exactly how I opened it. I was in the same exhibition room in Colombia, Bogota, 2017. I used the same way to open it. Because I also learned it from you open it always by a scene. But for someone who maybe it's their first time, how can they like stack those stories together?
Well, the first thing they do
Step
is
by
they have
step.
to get stories to stack, right? So you should always be
Okay.
working on stories, right? If you work
Yeah.
with a client or you work on a product or a project or something like that, you should be thinking about the stories that you can tell about this experience every time.
Mm.
So if someone says, how do you work with businesses, Matt, to tell stories? I have 1,000 stories to tell because I essentially have a story, at least one from every client I've worked with. Because when I'm done working with the client or done with the meeting, I ask myself, what could I share with someone else about this meeting I just had? Or what could I share with someone, you know, in this marketing campaign that I just built with this company? What lessons and takeaways do I have? Or what did I tell them that seemed really useful to them? So we have to actually acknowledge the work we're doing, hold on to it, and tell stories about it, even if we're just telling stories to ourselves before we tell them to someone else. So the first thing you have to do is have stories to stack. And then when I'm stacking them, what I'm trying to think about doing is I want to create as wide a universe as possible. So if I tell
Mm.
you a story about working with a biotech firm, right? I'm
Yeah.
not going to mention biotech again to you. Now I'm going to talk to you about working with Smuckers, helping them like make their peanut butter more interesting. And then when I'm done
Wow.
with that, I'm going to talk about Salesforce because that'll move me into tech, right? And then I might talk about a solopreneur who's like
Solopreneur.
building a business, you know, or an attorney who I'm helping to build an opening case, things like that. So I'm always trying to think, how can I bring in as much variety as possible to be interesting? Because if I just tell you 5 biotech stories, you will get bored. But if I'm
Yes.
constantly moving the landscape and showing you different looks on the same thing, that's going to be a lot more interesting for you.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I think that's a brilliant way to put it, because sometimes when we're in our work, very deep into our work, it's very hard for us to take a step back and really to draw the comparison in parallel for everyone's life. If you're now going to step away from your primary school teacher job to more on the consulting and corporate teaching, imagine you're going to pitch your business. How would you to tell a story like that for us?
Which business do you want me to pitch? The
Uh, mm, like
coaching and
the
consulting? That one? Okay. So coaching and consulting. Well, I would say something to the effect of, I guess I would say, I might take you a walk through the day of my life. So I'll do yesterday, for example. That's always powerful if you go, well, let me pitch you based upon what I did yesterday. Because that feels already like, wow, he's just going to tell me something that happened yesterday. But that's what I'll do.
yeah.
I'll say, so yesterday, I spent some time with a biotech reviewing their pitch deck and helping them express data in a more interesting way. And when that call ended, I shifted over to the Oregon Bar Association because I'm preparing to teach them how to tell better stories so that they can prep witnesses better. And then when that
Mm-hmm.
conversation was done, I actually shifted over to Microsoft. I'm working with their department of like that's their security division, we'll say. And I'm helping them tell better stories so that they can teach their teams how to be safer with technology that they use. And then I went over to an individual client who works for a large company, and she's getting ready to give a keynote to like an all hands situation, and I'm helping her build stories into the keynote. That was one day in my life. So the reason you want to hire me as a consultant or a coach is a couple of things. First, when I come to you, I am not a consultant who works in tech. I am not a consultant who works in biotech. I'm not a consultant who works in packaged goods. There's a lot of those people in the world. I'm
Yeah.
someone who is able to take the lessons of biotech and transfer them over to tech. And then I can take the lessons I learned in tech and bring them to an attorney to help them win a case. And then I can actually take the lessons I learned with the attorney and bring them to a team of rabbis to help them communicate better to their congregation. And weirdly, I can take those lessons and I can bring them to a packaging company to help them sell their product a little bit better. Like I am a person who has his feet in all the ponds, and I'm able to leverage all of the knowledge and wisdom of those ponds, and I bring them to you every time I talk to you. And I think that makes me more valuable than those specialized consultants who know a lot about your industry because you already know a lot about your industry. What you need is someone who knows a lot about a lot of industries so that I can bring that wisdom to you. Maybe that would be the story I tell, but that's just my first blush.
Yeah, that's great. When you said that it's good to take people through a day in life, I think I should learn more from that. And as you told about the story, I thought of this metaphor, like you're a Swiss knife, so it's very versatile,
Yes.
but it's all very functional, no matter which industry or case that you apply to. If we flip the script, let's say you're helping this biotech company, how do you help them to pitch to different levels of knowledge audience? If they pitch to someone who's an expert in the industry, if they pitch to an investor, or if they pitch to their customer, how do you help them? Because it's different.
Well, so what we do is if we're pitching to someone who has knowledge and expertise, we almost don't have
Yes.
to change the pitch very much. We can keep data existing as it already exists because that's what people are accustomed to. And so what we want to ask to the experts are the investors, let's say, what do they want to hear? And how can I tell them what they want to hear if that happens to be true? And I can tell it with the highest level of vocabulary and understanding that I need. When I'm pitching to a customer, if I'm pitching a medicine to a doctor, let's say, right, or a medicine to a customer, that medicine might be work for 9 out of 10 people, right? And I could say 9 out of 10 people as part of the story, or I could say, have you ever been bowling, right?
Yeah.
And if yes, I have been bowling, I'd say, well, how do you feel when you knock over 9 of the 10 pins? Pretty good, right? 9 out of 10 is pretty good. That's basically what we're managing to accomplish with this drug right now. We're managing to knock down 9 of the 10 pins. Now, admittedly, one pin, unfortunately, this medicine doesn't work for, but 9 out of 10 is pretty good. So I take a number like 9 out of 10 and I transfer it into a realm that they understand. And maybe it's not bowling if they've never been bowling, but I'm going to find something relatable. I'm going to do that thing that you said before, which is I'm going to create a scene. It's not really going to be a story, but I'm going to create a scene that will be visual to them so that they will always remember 9 out of 10 pins. When they go home and they speak to their spouse, I think I should take this medicine. It's knocking over 9 out of 10 pins every time you go bowling. Like I feel great when I knock over 9 out of 10 pins, right? I want people to be able to tell a story about the numbers and the data that we're providing people. And then I want to tell stories in a variety of ways. With this particular company I was working with, every story they have ever told has always been someone is sick, we give them medicine, and now they're healthy, right? That's an ABC story. And so I told them, sometimes you could tell stories differently to add some variety and engagement. So I said, what if we start with a healthy person and we say what you don't know about this healthy person is this is what they looked like 6 months ago, right? And then we introduced our medicine, and that's why you see them healthy today, which is a CAB story, right? We start at the end, and then we work our way back to the end. And we could do it in really clever ways to make it more interesting. Their minds were like blown. They couldn't believe it. Because in medicine, the story that they always tell is somebody's sick, let's give them some medicine and show how they're better. But you can see how that becomes pretty formulaic and boring over time. So I'm trying to help people tell different versions of the same story so that they can be entertained and the stories will strike the customer in a different way. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I remember you told about the storytelling techniques is to get the beginning as close as to the end, because that feels like the same here. One thing I wanted to ask is, in the startup world, for example, I just had my company for a year. Ideas are always changing. I somehow memorized the company idea when I started at the beginning, and then I have some pivot along the way. Also, some people always say that you fake it until you make it, right? You always put a statement out there. We have this beta, we have this waiting list. this and that. How do you strike the balance of like genuine, like where you are as a state, but also you have your vision so that people believe in you, that eventually you will get there? I think that's very hard.
I'll say a couple things. One is I think people invest in people more than companies and products. I think a lot of
Yes.
people go, I believe in this person. And because I believe in this person, I believe she's going to get to where she needs to go. And maybe where she needs to go is not where she thinks she needs to go, right? Which happens a lot in companies, right? Slack was a video game company that had an interesting internal communication system, which eventually became Slack. They ditched the video game and became Slack, right? But that was a person who knew how to move people and ideas forward, even if the idea ultimately changed, right? And so if you invested in Slack when it was a video game company, you weren't planning on owning stock in a communication and collaboration tool, but you're pretty happy that you did because you still made a lot of money. So I would be in my pitch desperately trying to get people to trust me, believe in me, and like me. I actually think liking people is really important, like feeling like I want to spend time with this person. You know, I learned from
Yes.
my agent, my literary agent. I asked her once, I said, do you ever turn down books, even though you know the book will sell because the author's kind of a terrible person? And she said, all the time. And I said, but you could make a profit on the book. And she said, yeah, but I don't want to spend my life working with people I don't like. And I think that applies to the startup world too. I think sometimes people go, I think this guy's going to make a lot of money, but I can't stand being in his presence. So it's not worth the investment because there's another opportunity around the corner. So I think you have to make sure that people like you, believe in you, trust you, and respect the fact that even if your vision changes, your commitment, your desire, your ability to move things forward will not change. So I think that's really important. I also think it's fine to acknowledge this company is on a path and paths can change. But the thing that
Yes.
won't change is our desire to move forward and to make sure that we maximize profitability for investors and ultimately shareholders, and that we build a great corporate culture that people are going to want to spend time in, and that I assemble a team of people who are some of the best in the world. Those are the things that I prioritize. If that means that in the end I thought I was going to make a vacuum, but instead I'm not a vacuum company anymore, but weirdly I'm making like lighting fixtures, right? But the lighting fixture company is crushing it, right? It's the team, it's the leader, it's the drive, it's the understanding about profit and, you know, returning profits to shareholders. Those are the things that people want. The idea is good and it's great when you have a good one, but I think most investors understand that ideas change, but
Yes.
great teams will always sort of win the day.
Yeah. I think that's one of the most important thing I've learned in the past year. Even I'm now just like a solopreneur. I feel like I have achieved a lot than I expected to. The same thing as when I was on stage. I watched back the playback. I sounded more confident than I remember. It's very
That's great.
surprising to me.
Good. You faked it until you made it.
Yeah.
Congratulations. Good job.
I even asked people to do a fist bump at the end, and then people are actually having fun. I don't know how do you feel about this? It keep coming back to me. I feel like as long as if you're having fun, and if you're sharing an idea on stage, it should be better than if you're
Yeah.
not.
Yes. It goes right back to that idea of if you're good, people are going to be happy. I've spoken for 3 hours. You know, I've done three
Wow.
hour presentations and, you know, forgive the hubris, but like the feedback I get is people always say, I can't believe it was 3 hours. It did not feel like 3 hours. That was so great. And that's just like I am relentless in my efforts to entertain at all times. Most people, almost every person on the planet, for some reason, thinks that when they stand on a stage or they have the microphone or they're in the front of the room, they just assume everyone's paying attention to them. And I genuinely, authentically assume that no one wants to hear anything I have to say unless I give them a
Yes.
reason to listen. I just think they're all awful people at all times. I know they're not. Like, I know there are some awful people in every audience, right? But I just assume they're terrible and they're like, they need to be entertained. They're like 5-year-olds. And if I'm not entertaining them while also providing ideas, instruction, coaching, consulting, then I'm useless. I think it honestly comes from 27 years of teaching children and understanding every day that they don't come to school hoping to learn long division. I have to find a way to get them excited about learning long division. I treat adults exactly the same way.
That's the most difficult audience of the world, actually, the primary school students. I was once a volunteer facing like a whole bunch of, I think, 10-year-old. I do not, do not hope to, I don't want to go back.
Yeah.
So hard.
Those are my kids, 10-year-olds. Yeah.
Speaking of, I feel like the past half a year, ChatGPT has been able to help me a lot. I think everyone uses ChatGPT or AI, whatever tools that they're using for storytelling, pitching, brainstorming ideas. But for me, it's more like I'm not a native English speaker. So it's really helpful when I have ideas in my own language. I can just throw whatever ideas there. I wanted to hear your opinion or your observation about the AI tools, because a lot of people say they're two camps, right? One is they don't want to use AI, period, and those people say that it's going to kill my creativity and whatsoever. And the other camp is they heavily rely on AI. As a storyteller, how do you think the future will look like for people who use AI to help them gather their stories? And how do you use AI yourself?
Well, I love AI because when people try to use it for the crafting of a story, we all know
Yeah,
it because it doesn't sound interesting. It sounds like things we've heard before because that's what AI can do. It's
yeah,
not really creating anything original. It's the summation of human communication. And so I often think that when I'm reading something that's written by AI, it's like a lawn that's been cut right down, perfectly cut. All the writing just looks like this. And then there's like this one flower that pokes out, and that's the person who didn't use AI to write their story. And so I love AI because I think it makes actual storytellers even more valuable and more evident of their skill. I do use AI though quite a bit. I believe in using AI for brainstorming. I might say to AI, I'm looking for ways to compare trees to something else that's tall. Can you make a list of all those things for me? And so rather what I would normally do is I'd sit around and think I'm writing a joke about trees and I need something to compare it to being tall. I could get that done in 15 minutes, or AI can produce a list that I might not even use something off the list, but it might send me in a direction I wasn't going to go in originally. I go, oh, I won't use that, but I'll use something like that. So for idea generation, I love it. For the brainstorming that I often did, which would take 15 minutes to 2 days sometimes to come up with the right thing, I can use AI to help me with that. I'll use AI to do things like write an email that requires no creativity whatsoever. The boring business communication of the day, I have no problem having AI do that. But if it's any level of creativity at all, or I want to actually sound like Matthew Dix, then I have to write it myself. AI can't sound like Matthew Dix. There's some projects in the works right now with other large companies where they're sort of turning me into an AI version of me so I can help teach storytelling. And we've acknowledged a couple things. One is it can only get you like 20% of the way there. So it can start you on the path, but it really can't get you far enough without actually working with me, reading my book, that kind of a thing. But the other thing is, as much as they want it to sound like me, it never quite sounds like me. They can't even get it to sound like me. I'm very direct, and
yeah.
AI is built to be very polite. And so they can't get it to be the right level of direct without it sounding rude. They're like, you have this weird sweet spot where you tell people the truth, but it doesn't come across as rude. But when AI does it, it sounds rude. And that's just the idea that as close as AI might get to simulating a human being's communication pattern, they're never going to get there. It's never going to really make you feel like you're in the presence of that person. I think it's great for a lot of ways, but I think anyone who thinks they're going to use it to write their content or write a book or write a story, it's going to write a book or a story, and it's going to be that lawn of grass. Everyone else's grass is going to be cut your level, and it's going to all look the same.
Yeah, I totally agree. Because sometimes I saw like LinkedIn posts that's just one click by AI. You can tell immediately. For master storytellers like yourself, of course, whatever that you wrote is gonna be way better than AI. For people who just starting out to start writing things, how can they work better with AI? For example, for me, I feel like just by learning from AI, because it has the same as brainstorming, they have all the great storytelling techniques. It's just a much faster iteration for myself. Also because English is not my native language. But then how do you, like for people who are just starting out, how can they best utilize AI but still keep their creativity?
Right. Before I tell you, I just want to tell you that your English, at least your spoken English, is perfectly fine. I work with a lot of people for whom English is their second language, and there's a lot of hesitation and concern. And I
Yeah.
always tell them, like, as long as I understand what you're saying, your English is perfectly fine, and your English is perfectly fine. So you
Thank you.
don't worry about that at all. In terms of using AI, I guess what I would do is I would use AI to help brainstorm ideas for stories, but not necessarily the stories themselves. I had to pitch to a magazine yesterday. I write a humor column for a magazine. The magazine's called Seasons. It comes out 4 times a year. So I always have to write a humor column about, I had to pitch ideas for fall and winter. So I went to AI and I said to AI, can you give me a list of funny fall magazine ideas written as if Matthew Dix would write them in this, and with the kind of humor that Matthew Dix has, because the AI knows me really well. I didn't actually use any of the ideas it gave me, but it caused me to think of an idea that I then pitched to them. And then I did the same thing for the winter. And in the winter one, I actually took the AI's idea and sort of modified it a little. But that's about as far as I would take it. Then I'd start the actual writing or crafting process on my own. I wouldn't sort of ask AI to do any of that work for me. I would start with my authentic voice as clearly as I possibly can. And AI is probably done at that point for me, unless I'm brainstorming something in the middle of it, unless I'm trying to find a list of something or another way to say something, or I need a quote. I need someone in the world who once said something like this. Can you make it a woman instead of a man? And AI will go find the quote for me. But that, otherwise it's going to be me all the way in what hits the page.
Yeah, I totally agree. I also think sometimes AI can give me the whole script, but I'm the person who will be in front of audience and I will be the person who's hosting this podcast. There's no way I can just come unless someone who can master the trick of somebody speaking in their ears and deliver it with no time lag. Otherwise, I remember what Anna Ong said to me on this podcast. She said the life itself is just an improvisation. So this is something that, as of now at least, thankfully, AI cannot replace. And this is what I will also be more intentional. I think it's a good time that you can share a little bit about the homework for life practice with us. So our audience can also learn from you, because I started doing that since 2020, 2019. It really, really helps me. It used to be my life is just boring. Like I don't know what kind of things happen. And then I started my YouTube channel. And then now I'm reflecting. Every day I have so many stories that I want to capture. Unlimited amount of stories and ideas for my YouTube. But I want my audience to learn from the man who created this.
Well, I'm glad you just said that, because it was a good endorsement. I also will say, I love what Anna said. Life is nothing but improvisation. Like, quite literally, you don't know the next sentence you're going to speak to me, and you're going to make it up as you speak. That's a real true thing. And I love that. I love that thought. I'm going to steal that thought from Anna. I'll email her later and tell her I'm stealing the thing. I'm going to say it. I'll credit her for a while, and then I'll forget she said it. But anyway, homework for life is the idea that every single day contains something that's worth holding on to. And oftentimes it contains content that is useful to us, either as storytellers or business people, entrepreneurs, even people who want to communicate with friends or children or spouses. What happens in our life is we live our lives and we basically throw every day away as if it's worthless. So if I ask you what you did last Thursday, you really can't tell me unless you look at a calendar. And if I ask you, like, how many days of 2017 can you remember? Like, if you're really good and I give you enough time, you might come up with maybe 50 days that you can remember something from, which means you took a 365-day year and switched it down to 50 days, which is why it feels like time flies, because it doesn't really fly. Just ask an incarcerated person if time flies, or ask a fifth grade teacher on recess duty if time flies. It doesn't, right? It goes by unremembered. So if homework for life is, let's remember at least one moment from every day. Now, writing the story out would be silly because that's a chore that no one will want to do. So for me, it's a spreadsheet, right? 2 columns, an A column with the date and the B column that I stretch across the screen. So I only give myself the length of a computer screen to actually record my story. I have an app now that just came out last week. So now I actually can do it on my phone. My phone gives me a reminder. I don't need the reminder, but lots of people will need the reminder. And there's actually an AI component to it, where after you enter your homework for life moment, you can ask AI, would Matthew Dix possibly see a story in this moment? Like, what do you think the story might be? And so AI can actually start brainstorming story ideas based upon your moments. But the key is every single day you sit down and record at least one moment that happened that day, very briefly. And the thing I've come to understand over time is it's not always something that happened. Sometimes it's just a thought that you had, or a feeling you had, or I have in my homework for life text messages, like a text message exchange between me and a friend that I never wanted to forget because it was a moment that meant something to me. So, when I started homework for life back in 2011, I was finding like 1.2 moments per day. And today I find 7.8 moments per day, not because my life is more interesting, but because I see more things. Back then I was looking for stories when I first started. Now I just look for moments. Oftentimes those moments are stories or parts of stories, but a lot of times they aren't, but they're just moments I want to hold on to. I did some analysis for my latest book, and about 10% of the moments that end up in my homework for life, I eventually include in a story or a book or a magazine article, which means 90% of the stuff I write down is only for me. It never leaves homework for life. It never gets published in the world some way, but it's still incredibly valuable for me because I hold on to my days. Our days are worth holding on to.
Yeah, our days are worth holding on to. Now I think back, I think the improvisation quote is actually from me when I was talking to Anna On, but I will go back and listen to the podcast. It doesn't matter that much. Two things I want to tap into. The app, is this something that you are working on, or is it an app by someone else? I will need to go and download this, or at least put it in the show notes.
Yes, it's in the Apple Store. It's for iPhone only right now. I built it with a guy named Pete Sina. I've had a lot of people over the years ask to partner with me to build an iPhone app for Homework for Life. And I always said no because they didn't care about storytelling. They just cared about building an app, leveraging my
Yeah.
IP. When Pete came to me, he had already built his own Homework for Life app because he was doing Homework for Life and he loved it so much that he wanted to be able to do it more simply. And he was fully invested in storytelling. He was looking to tell stories. He had read my books. And then he discovered that I lived 40 minutes away from him in Connecticut. And so he invited me to lunch, and it was over that lunch that we decided maybe we should build the app together because that's what he does. He's an app developer and he owns businesses. He's actually kind of like an Andrew Wilkinson. He owns a bunch of companies and he builds web apps and he builds websites. He's that kind of a guy. And so, because he loved storytelling and was already invested in Homework for Life, he was the person I eventually decided to partner with. So now it's available in the App Store.
I've been writing down the homework for life for a while, but I really never really looked back to it. So you have a mechanism to resurface the moment. I have another practice. It's called failure journal. I think it's developed when this professor of Princeton or Wharton or something. It's like something that very bad happened to me. I would write down something on the day, and then I would set a reminder a month later and 6 months later. So it actually resurfaced the story to me intentionally, right? Because I was feeling very bad at the time. And 1 month later, it's like nothing. 6 months later, I don't even care. Well, from since 2011, how do you look back to your journal, the homework
Sure.
for life, to do that?
You realize that failure journal is what I described to you about doing hard things, which is you just pretend that it's 2 weeks from now and you know it's not going to mean anything to you. The failure journal is just the reverse of that, like recognizing that things that bother you don't bother you in the future.
Mm-hmm.
So my process in the spreadsheet, at least, which I'm still using actually, is I do 100 entries on a spreadsheet, and then I switch to a new spreadsheet, a new tab in my spreadsheet. So I only do 100 at a time. So I have I have my homework for life right here. So I'm wondering how many tabs I have now. So I currently have 89 tabs, which means I have about 8,900 entries of homework for life. And so what I do is I let 100 go by and another 100 go by. And then eventually, after a couple hundred go by, I go back and look. And I say, all right, 200 entries ago, what was worth holding on to in a value? And I highlight them in my spreadsheet. And then if I think they're actually going to be a story, I copy them and also move them to a list of here's stories I can someday tell. So they still exist chronologically, but now I can move the data around and hold it in several places. I enjoy going back and looking and going, oh, wow, that's a story. Sometimes you don't know it's a story, and then you discover later it is a story. And sometimes you think it's a story, but you realize later on, oh, it's just something that happened to me. It seemed exciting at the moment, but it wasn't really a story. It was just a thing. So you need that little bit of perspective. For me, it's usually about a month after something's happened that I'm looking back and highlighting what I think is going to be valuable someday. And then when I'm on a plane without Wi-Fi, I go and relive years, which is always fun. Yeah.
Yeah. I love the time on the plane without Wi-Fi. It's like the best time to write things. I want to touch upon on this asking questions, because I think a lot of the time the quality of my stories depends on the quality of my questions.
Yes.
And the quality of the conversations also depends on the questions. What's the technique or habit that instantly make questions more powerful? And how can someone practice it more regularly?
Are you talking about questions of yourself or of other people?
Like in a conversation, how do I ask better questions like this? And also,
Yeah.
for example, like I'm going to IP3, like what kind of questions can hold people's attention?
Right. So the how questions are usually the best questions. Occasionally the why questions too. So how and why are always better. I'm always trying to ask the question that doesn't get asked. So when I meet someone, they often ask, what do you do for a living? And I say, tell me how you ended up in the job that you're currently in, which invites them to tell a story. When we ask questions that cause people to tell stories, then they're excited because we've opened a door for them and allowed them to speak in a way that they don't often get to speak. So if I find out they're married, I'll say, tell me how you asked your wife to marry you, right? If you were the proposer,
Yeah.
right? And that's again, I don't, rather than saying, what does your wife do for a living or what does your husband do for a living? Ask them a story about some relationship moment with their spouse instead. So I'm just always searching for stories. And oftentimes it's the how question that gets people to tell stories. How did you find that idea for the product that you currently are building? You know, if someone says, oh, I own a company and we build a special kind of sunglasses. I don't say like, tell me about the sunglasses. I say, how did you get the idea for that company? Or why did you think that was important? What was the first thing you did when you decided you wanted to be an entrepreneur? What was the very first thing that you did? Like, did you tell someone? Did you stick a dollar to the seat, to the wall? Like, what did you do? Those how and why questions invite stories. What you want to do is you want to ask questions and invite people to tell stories.
Yeah, like open-ended questions. I start to ask questions about, I also learned it from another podcast, Diary of a CEO. What's one exciting project that you're working on? The example you just gave is kind of like looking back. One fear I have is for these, let's say someone I've never met before, but they're very successful. They've been used to tell all of those stories, no matter what you ask. But for a forward-looking story, forward-looking questions, that's the only one thing I got. What's the one exciting project that you're working on? Do you have something else
Yeah, I
that
don't
you
like that
usually
question
ask?
actually.
You don't? Okay.
No, I don't like that.
How can we make it better?
I don't like that question because it forces someone to choose, and that's often difficult for people. What if I have three really exciting things? Now you've asked me to choose between them. You're like making me choose which child is my favorite, you know? And I don't like to put people in that position where they have to make that choice. They almost feel like they're under the gun, like the spotlight is on them. I don't like to spotlight people, you know? I might say something instead like, so what have you been working on this week? Which is a much easier question because they don't have to choose. Like they can just think, oh, here's a thing I've been working on this week, you know, or so you have a company. What's the challenge you're trying to tackle right now for the company? What's your company's biggest challenge? They know what that is. They don't have to choose that, right? If I say, what's your most exciting project? If you ask me that question, I'd be stuck. I'd be like, oh, I don't know. Like, I'm excited about so many things. You're making me choose. That's a really awful question. But if you ask me, what's the biggest challenge I'm facing right now? I could answer that right away. So,
Okay.
you know, and if you ask me, like, what's the thing that you're most excited about doing in July? I'd be like, oh, I know what that is too. Like, I know about fun things I have coming up, exciting things I have coming up. But if you say, what's my most exciting project? Now I have to choose. I don't like that very much.
Okay. So it's like a twist. So let me ask those two questions. What's your biggest challenge right now? And what's the fun things coming up to you in July?
My biggest challenge is settling on the idea that I might not teach after next year. Deciding to not be a teacher, that is my biggest challenge. And the thing I'm most excited about coming up is my wife and I are celebrating our 19th anniversary. I've managed
Oh,
to get rid
congrats.
of the kids, which is not an easy thing for us to do. And we're going to spend 3 days in New York City, and I have some surprises planned for her, and I'm very excited about that.
Wow, congrats.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing that.
Yeah.
And also share the vulnerability of making the decisions of leaving the kids.
Yeah.
I bet.
It is my perpetual problem until I do it, probably. It'll be the thing I worry about the most. Am I leaving children behind? Am I not supporting my colleagues in the way I should still support them? Am I being selfish? Things like that.
I think from an outsider's perspective, at least to me, if you have more time to dedicate the work that you're doing, hopefully it will create bigger impacts for people. You can help more kids and more colleagues.
Yeah.
And
I don't think that's really true. I think people say that to
no,
me, but it's not really true. You know, they're like,
why?
oh, if you help adults, it'll ultimately help children. Like, I know that when kids need help and I'm right there for them, that's the best you can do for a kid. Not like, I'll help their parents be more successful so their parents will be able to support them. No, like the best thing you can do is to actually be with a child in a moment of need. That's the best thing you can do. And maybe after next year, I won't do that anymore.
That really sounds a challenge that I don't. Hopefully that next year when we come back, we can hear how you overcome that challenge.
The thought I always have is in summer vacation, in the middle of summer vacation, I never want to go back to school because I haven't
Yeah.
seen the kids yet, the new kids. So as long as I don't see the new kids, I might be okay.
Okay, that's
Yeah.
the right time to move.
Right.
We have a
Yes.
lightning round.
Okay.
Are you ready?
Yes.
Okay, so You teach storytelling constantly, but what's one personal storytelling habit or trick that surprised you recently, if there's any?
Well, I found a new humor strategy that I love that I don't get to use very often, but I saw on Saturday Night Live and I realized, oh, that's a strategy. And that is, I call it cut out the middle. And so it's a simple, like in the simplest version of it, in the opening scene, I say, listen, I don't care what anyone says. I'm never going to eat broccoli again because it's awful. And then you show a scene a week later and I have a giant pile of broccoli in front of me and I'm devouring it. You cut out the middle, and that's how to create some humor. That's a bad version of it, but there are better versions of it. But it's not often that I find a new humor strategy, and I just found that new one about cutting out the middle. It's the contrast of the two things that make the humor work when you take out that middle section. So that surprised me that I found a new one. That's my 27th humor strategy now that I have.
Great. I'd love to hear more about the humor strategy.
Yeah.
If storytelling was an Olympic sport, what would your gold medal category be?
It would be my ability to craft a story on the spot that sounds like I spent a long time crafting it. Improvisational storytelling would be my gold medal category.
Wow, that's, I would say, the hardest category. That's amazing. Looking forward to learn from men in person. Do you have any new tool or gadget that's life-changing for you this past year and that's under $100?
Well, I had one. I was thinking about that the other day. What was it? It's life-changing for me, but not for many people. A new golf watch that I have. It's a golf watch. I've always had something that tells me the distance to the hole, but this one tells me how far I actually hit the ball too. So I can gauge how well I'm hitting it over the course of a day. It's very helpful to me.
Okay. We have unpacked a lot of like storytelling habits. Do you have anything new or quirky habit that you secretly adopted?
That I have secretly adopted? I've adopted avoiding the phrase, to be honest, because I can't stand it when people say it. When they go, to be honest, right? I'm like, that implies you weren't being honest before. And I discovered I say it too. So the quirky habit is stop saying dumb things. And I'm going to stop saying, to be honest, because it's useless words that mean nothing and only imply that maybe you're less truthful than I thought you were.
That's a good habit. I need to adopt that.
Yeah. I also hate, guess what, by the way, is terrible too. Anyone who goes, guess what? It's terrible. You should, when someone says, guess what to me, what I always go is, no, thank you. Because I'm not interested in guessing what. Just tell me the thing instead of telling me to guess what, because you don't really want me to guess, right? All you want me to do is to say what, right? It's just a silly little verbal patter that we don't need in our lives. So get rid of that one too. I don't use that one, but I hear it all the damn time.
Yeah, that's so true. We have a tradition, as you know, it's pass it on. So the return edition is 2 parts. First part is you're going to answer a question from a previous guest. So his question is, why are you motivated every morning? What gets you out of bed? And your answer cannot include your wife or your husband or your kids.
Right. It would not include any of them anyway.
Yeah.
I get up around 4 o'clock every morning, naturally now, just my eyes open. You can do that if you get up at the same time every day. And what motivates me is I know that for at least 2 and maybe 3 hours, I am going to be awake while the rest of the world is asleep. Most people are sleeping between 4 and 7 a.m. And I am motivated by the fact that I am getting ahead of all of them for 3 hours. Like I have a 3-hour head start on the world when I wake up at 4 a.m. And that motivates me to work really hard to maximize that head start to the greatest degree possible.
Yeah, I remember last year we recorded the episode when you're at your 6 a.m. We share a lot of like productivity hacks.
Yes. Yeah. I love the fact knowing that I'm doing a great job at something and other people might not be doing as great a job.
Yeah. The second part of the return edition is you're going to answer a question by yourself that you left last year. So your question is,
tell me about the terrible person in your life who taught you a valuable lesson. I think that oftentimes we learn things from sort of the worst boss we've ever had, the parent who didn't understand us, the frenemy who, betrayed us. I think some of our most valuable lessons come in negative experiences. And I think that's also a great way to reframe a negative experience by looking for the takeaway in a similar way that I look at the most traumatic moment, the most horrific moment of my life, the robbery, and I take away the value from it. Unfortunately, I'm sort of stuck with the PTSD in my particular case. Yeah. But in most cases, you don't end up with that. In most cases, if you extract the value from a terrible situation, that terrible situation suddenly has purpose and meaning. So I'm always asking people, like, tell me about the worst person in your life and what they taught you. Oh, that's great. I'm asking myself that question from last year.
Yeah.
So I love that idea. The worst person in my life right now is one of my neighbors, just a bad decision maker who's creating problems in our neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
And what I've learned from this person is, although I always tell people that what you look like on the outside is not relevant, you can actually alter the opinions of people in a negative way if you take so little care of how you look on the outside. And so I used to think it didn't matter. Like, it doesn't matter what you dress, what you wear, it doesn't matter at all. You get to wear whatever you want. Nobody will, like, if you're good, no one will judge you. No, there is a point where you will be judged. And this person has proven to me that there are examples where physical appearance does alter the way people think about you, and probably should. And so I've learned that I might have been wrong about that, at least in the extreme cases.
Yeah. Now, what is your spicy and evolved new question for the next guest?
For the next guest, right? Not for me?
Yes.
Okay. So I want to know, what's the worst advice you've ever been given?
What's the worst advice you've ever been given?
Yeah, because people always say, what's the best advice? And I don't ever have an answer for that question. I genuinely don't think I've gotten a lot of good advice in my life. I think I've gotten a lot of bad advice. And so I think we can actually learn from bad advice. We can learn something about the person who's giving us the advice, because they're giving us bad advice. So there's something questionable about this person already. And I think we can learn something about, if we follow that bad advice and things don't work out, like, that's a good lesson to learn. Mistakes are really valuable. So when you get bad advice, it's the invitation to make a mistake that you will learn from. So I want to know what the worst advice you have is, that you've ever been given is.
Okay, great. It's so great to have you back, Matthew. I really, really enjoyed the conversation. I hope you did too. I can't wait to see you in person.
Yes, I will see you in a couple months at IP3. We'll have a lot of fun.
Yes, we'll have a lot of fun. See you.
All right,
Thank
thanks.
you.
Take care.
So that's another episode of Escape 9 to 5. Escape 9 to 5 is my way to help people visualize and see the stories behind those who have changed their life from a traditional 9 to 5 job to a different portfolio life. If you like this video, you might resonate with this video as well. All the links will be in the show notes, and you feel free to check out. If you listen to this on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, and if you like it, don't forget to give us a 5-star review. It really helps the podcast to be discovered by other people. And if you like any specific clips or mantras or any takeaway from this video, please share with us in the comments down below. Share with your friends and family. That really, really helps the podcast. Thanks for being on this amazing journey. Until next time, I hope this episode gives you a little bit of inspiration, nudge you a little bit to do something on your own, or just try something out for the first time ever. We're here with you. We have this whole community and all the guests coming. I'll see you next time.